The news is a little bit depressing. It's a bit confusing. There's a lot going on in the world. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Up On It. I am Charlene. So I was gone for a minute, but I'm back again. Today's video is going to be on commercial awareness. I know that's a term that a lot of you guys will probably hear gets thrown around quite a lot. So I'm going to be talking through what it is, how you get it, how you demonstrate that you have it, and actually why do we need to know anything about commercial awareness. So hopefully you guys find this video really useful. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, and follow me on my socials. Okay, so to be honest with you, I didn't really know what commercial awareness really was until maybe I was in like second year of university. So for those of you guys who've not seen my previous videos, first of all, go and watch them. But I read law as an undergraduate and for my master's. So it's very much what's going on in the world. So you kind of have to have an understanding of politics, domestic politics, international politics, and just what's going on in the world and how that affects the law. So you have to. And I think for me personally, I've never really been one to, you know, sit down and watch the 6 o'clock news every night. Particularly nowadays, I'm sure you will all agree, the news is a little bit depressing. It's a bit confusing. There's a lot going on in the world. And so how do you get the information in the news without actually having to be bogged down by the news? So here are my top tips on commercial awareness. So I exaggerate, of course. I do know what's going on in the world. You know, I think that it's important to know it just for your own self, to know what's going on out there. I think sometimes it can be information overload, and I think it's about how you pick out relevant information, not fake news, from the correct sources, and from the correct sources. Shout out to the Shade Room. I love the Shade Room, but that's not where you should be getting your news from. But it seems like that's where a lot of people are getting their news from. A lot of people are getting their news from gossip blogs and from gossip sites, and I think that should just be left to celebrity news, to be honest. So what is commercial awareness? So simply put, commercial awareness is having an understanding of what's going on in the business world, whether it be domestically or globally, just having an understanding of what's happening and how it can affect you as somebody who is an employee or an entrepreneur in your day-to-day work. Why do I need to know anything about commercial awareness? I think the first thing is just on a basic level. Most places now, when you go to interview, they will ask you about a news story. They will probably ask you something about what's going on, whether it be globally or domestically. I mean, they may not ask you about Brexit, because I think we're all sick of it, to be honest with you, but they will ask you a question about something in the news. And so just on an interview level, it's good to have some examples that you can pull out that you feel comfortable to talk about. I think it demonstrates that you are conscious, that you are aware, that you know how to join the dots. I think it's one thing going to work and doing your job every day, but actually how does your job affect what's happening in the wider scale? And also, more importantly, how does what's going on in the wider scale affect your job? So that's why it's important on a kind of simple level. To interview, make sure that you have followed 2 or 3 stories really well and you feel comfortable to be able to talk about them. There's no point in knowing 10 news stories but with no depth. I think it's better for you to know 2 or 3 really well, so that if anyone asks you a question, you know the facts, you know the stats, and you also have an opinion based on what you think, you know, what's been presented to you. And then I think if you take it one step further, so let's say you've got the job, how does your day-to-day and commercial awareness fit in together? And I think it's important to note that it absolutely does. So for example, if you are a consultant in business, you have to know what's going on, because you might have paying clients. Imagine if you don't know what's going on and you don't know what your competitors are doing, you don't know what's going on with your clients outside of maybe what they've said to you, something big is happening and you haven't clocked it, you don't know what's going on. That could lose you a lot of money. I think another good reason to have it is that it also gives you idea generation. I think purely from just like an observational point of view, knowing what's in the market, knowing what else is out there, knowing who's doing well, knowing what trends are happening, what's not happening. I think it puts you at an advantage for you to be able to, if you're selling a product or a service, it puts you at an advantage to be able to say, I know that this is the trend, this is not working, and therefore I'm going to be able to adapt my product or my service to make sure that this is the one that is the best. So how do I get this commercial awareness? So we talked about the news and my current disdain for it, but I think that it is important, obviously, to know what's going on in the news. So I have something called Google Alerts. If you don't have Google Alerts, definitely definitely sign up to it. So you put in certain keywords, so anytime that that thing pops up in the news, you'll get an alert on your phone and it will send you the link to the news stories and you can read all about it. So therefore you don't have to go drudging through pages and pages of Google trying to find news stories, or spend the night before your interview trying to find a year's worth of news stories and to memorize. This way you're getting up-to-date information the minute that it's put out in the press. You're getting an alert on your phone, send the links to the news story and you can read it, and it's quite digestible. If you are one for social media, if you'd rather see your news at your fingertips, I think that it's a good way to start. I think that it gives highlights, and I think that it's also really good to just follow it through and read more about it if you can. I think that because of the way we consume information so quickly, I think people who are producing news know that people don't want to read pages and pages of information, and therefore when you look at the social media pages, they'll give you the highlights of the news and what's going on, and then it's up to you how much more you want to go and take away from that and do your own research. But yeah, I would follow, you know, BBC News, I'd follow Guardian, CNN, whichever one that you feel like you want to hear from. And I think sometimes I follow pages where I don't necessarily agree with everything they're saying, but I think it's good to have different perspectives to have a really rounded opinion. And I think what you need to be very careful of is the elusive sources. Who are these sources? Sources say, who are the sources? So always be very careful when you are reading the news from sources, because we don't know who the sources are, and just make sure that you're researching more and more. Like these days anyone can say anything and say sources said. We have seen viral things going on that were completely false. You know, don't throw away social media for news. I know that sometimes, you know, I'm not talking about the shade room or any of those ones, but I know sometimes that people can you know, not look at social media at all. But actually sometimes if you look at Twitter news or you look at LinkedIn, it can actually give you some really good information, particularly LinkedIn. If you take away the personal stuff, there are some good news stories on there, trending topics that you can look at as well. Just make sure again that you're filtering through and making sure that they're coming from good sources. Another way to really increase your commercial awareness is to actually go to events at organisations, so whether it be insight evenings or insight days, and actually speak to professionals and get their line of thinking in terms of what kind of news outlets that they're looking at, or what stories they're following. I think that's like a cheat code basically, is actually talking to professionals, because they'll tell you these are the news stories that are important, this is where I get my information from, this is how I link it all together, and this is how I present it to a client. So I think it's really important that you do make that kind of effort. So sign up to events, go to networking events, go to fairs, sign up to things like Bright Network and all that kind of stuff, where they promote opportunities for you guys to be able to go and meet professionals and network and really increase your commercial awareness. Another great way to increase your commercial awareness is through podcasts. I love podcasts. I think it's just a really great way to digest information, and so I think that if you are that way inclined, absolutely help some podcasts. And I've just recently found out that a lot of these organizations, they put out their own podcasts. They've done the work for you. So there are some organizations where if you literally Google it, you will find these organizations who put out podcasts about what they are thinking about when it comes to commercial awareness, where their focuses are on commercial awareness, how what's going on in the news affects their business on a day-to-day. They have done the work for you. You have no excuse. So yes, definitely listen to some podcasts. If you're in the UK, make sure that it's obviously UK centric to how it's going to affect the UK. Again, it's obviously good to get global business news, but make sure that it's relevant. There's also news apps that summarize the information for you as well, so that you can look at it in chunks of information and make up your own mind about what you want to do with that information. So I try to read opinion pieces. I love an opinion piece, but I also sometimes just want to see the facts. I don't always want someone to tell me what I should think about something. I think it's good to have the two positions. So definitely read things like The Economist or you know, the Financial Times, and things that are very focused in a particular area, but also read different types of bits of information. So read things that are purely factual, read things that are opinionated, and then form your own opinion based on that. I think sometimes it's dangerous to use somebody's opinion as a fact. Make sure that you go to the fact first and research the facts so that you can build your own story. So guys, commercial awareness is purely just knowing what's going on in the world and how that can affect you in your job and in your day-to-day. Fully understand that the news is not where people want to be today, but I think it's really important that you use whether the podcasts or whether the apps or whether it be the news outlets on social media, and then doing your own research. It is important to know these things. things that can affect you can be tax, it can be new laws, it can be new regulations. There's so much going on in the world right now, which is probably why we're avoiding the news, but there's so much going on that sometimes it's good to just know it, just so that you know how it's affecting your life. So if you can only take it in small doses, that's absolutely fine, but just being aware, because yes, it does affect your life. And also remember to register to vote, guys. Awareness, I hope you've been able to gain a little bit of information about how to be commercially aware, why it's important, and how it can help you going forward. Make sure you follow me on all my socials. Everything is at Up On It Careers. DM me, email me, and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you really soon. I actually mean that this time. I will see you really soon. Bye, guys.